Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. In tonight's show, we're going to be taking a look at Egypt's pivotal and leading role in helping the whole African continent reach their destination of development, also security and peace. We're going to be looking at Egypt's role within the African continent. But before we start doing that, let's check out the story making the news today. And it's President Abdel al-Sisi who was briefed in the executive position of projects being implemented by the Ministry of Housing nationwide today. This came during the President's meeting with Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Minister of Housing Haleem al-Gazzar. Presidential Cabinet spokesman Bassam Radi said the meeting discussed the projects include the Great Revelation or Al-Tagalli Al-Azam project in Sinai, the new Mansoura, new Haleem cities and the Sawari area. Radi added that the meeting also reviewed means to develop Old Cairo and the project dubbed Housing for All Egyptians or Sakan Kull al-Masriyin. And ladies and gentlemen, we're joined now over the phone to shed more light on this presidential meeting by Dr. Mohamed al-Sherbini, Professor of Architecture and Urban Design, the Department of Architecture Engineering at Cairo University. Dr. Sherbini, can you hear me, sir? Good evening.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
I'm very well, sir. Dr. Sherbini, first of all, we know about the new Mansoura city, the new Haleem city. We know a little bit as well about the Housing for All Egyptians initiative. But let's take a closer look at the Great Revelation project in Sinai Peninsula, Al-Tagalli Al-Azam. Now, this project is a really very hopeful project, and it's a really unique in its nature, given the unique location it's located in, which is the Sinai Peninsula, a place which is very touristic, very holy as well, encapsulating all the three different religions. Now, can you please tell us more about such a project?
Yes, thank you very much for your invitation. First of all, we must declare that Ministry of Housing now is going to a new revolution in Egyptian urban development through mega projects such as new cities and even new projects dedicated to discover some places which was denied and forgotten for several years, such as the middle of Sinai and the area of St. Catherine, where the project of Al-Tagalli Al-Azam, that is one of the mega projects that push the touristic place of Egypt all over the world. This place is, or this project is a mega service project for the area, with harmony with the environment, because this area is very sensitive as an environmental preserved area with a distinguished environmental character and also a unique place. This project is one of the mega projects to develop the Sinai as one of the first priority areas in Egypt. If we talk about St. Catherine, and as you said, it is a connection to the three main religions and with different characteristic, different places to holy places for the three religions. We noticed that this project is including some facilities and services that help to be that help to evolve this place as one of the major touristic destination for in Sinai, in addition to Sharm el-Sheikh, Taba, and all other places. I think this project will be one of the pilot projects dedicated to develop our, let's say, not forgotten touristic places, but some places that need to be discovered and developed with such projects.
Well, sir, should we expect this project, Al-Tagali Al-Azam, to be a similar place to Sharm el-Sheikh or Hurghada or Guna, or should we expect something of a different nature? We understand there will obviously be places of worship. It will be a fully equipped city, a fully equipped project, but there's also talk about a different, unique design that goes along with the unique nature and characteristic of this place.
Yeah, look, we have different types of tourism. This project is dedicated to one of the main touristic destination and touristic activities. It is culture, religion, service at the same time. That's why it will be a unique project. It's not. It could not be compared with Sharm el-Sheikh or Hurghada, Guna. Each and every project has its characteristic. I think the Jabal Musa and Saint Catherine and these places need to be have more exposure in the touristic plan and the touristic map of Egypt. This project will be such a it will be as you say one of the major projects at touristic destination in this area. You know, with these all services and places to explore and to shed more light on these holy places in Saint Catherine.
Will the approach be similar to the approach being taken towards developing and upgrading Old Cairo, the historical Cairo, with all the historical locations that are situated there, or is it a different sort of strategy altogether?
No, I think it is the same strategy, is to develop the cultural tourism, and we do have a similar project at old Fatimid Cairo and Mujamma al-Adyan and all this, the hanging church. We do not have only a pharaonic monument. We do have also some other monuments that we need to shed light on and to take a benefit from these projects.
Dr. Sherbini, now looking at the new cities, obviously you've mentioned that the Ministry of Housing and Urban Planning is really exerting a lot of efforts into really changing the demographic nature of the whole country. Looking at the new Mansoura, new Alamein city, everyone's in the north coast now. Everybody can see the development and the work in progress taking place in new Alamein city. How would you rate the work that's being done in these new cities, and do you think it will really change the way or the places or the locations or the distribution of the Egyptian population in the near future?
I think the approach to these cities is to change the mentality of the Egyptian dedicated to the north coast is for 2 months for the summer, and in the other time of the year it is not
Inhabited, yes.
It's not livable. You know, New Alamein, it's not a beach, touristic village with mega facilities. It is a new city, really a new city that is dedicated to develop the north coast of Egypt to be used for the whole year. New Mansoura also, it is not a housing project only. If you search for New Mansoura, you will find 4 universities in a very closed area. That means that it is dedicated to be a service place for all North Delta and North Delta government. This approach, it's different new approach for new cities to, as you say, change the demographic distribution in Egypt, to spread the area, the livable area and inhabited area in Egypt.
Yes. Dr. Ahmed Sherbini, Professor of Architecture and Urban Design at the Department of Architecture, Faculty of Engineering, Cairo University. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, now focusing our attention to tonight's topic, Egypt is spearheading its efforts to really drag and push the African continent on its path to development. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back to talk more about it.
For a very long time, Egypt has played a fundamental and pivotal role in Africa. Since President Abdel al-Sisi has taken the helm, Egypt is boosting its leadership role in the African continent, thanks to its new foreign policy, which prioritizes and enhances the continent on the road for development and stability in various domains. Egypt is destined to take on this role, and the reason for it are manifold. Not only is Egypt the axis of stability in the region, it is also endowed with a majestic history, a mighty military establishment, a kaleidoscope of experienced professionals, and a cultural wealth like no other on the African continent. The leadership role also stems from the realization that Africa is key to Egypt and vice versa. The Nile, Egypt's backbone, joins Egypt to its fellow African nations for one thing. Egypt is keen to intensify its presence in Africa through collaboration, investment, and diplomacy. As influential as Egypt is, it neither interferes in other countries' issues nor plays a partisan role in their affairs. Egypt aids in ending conflicts rather than in instigating them. It has no ulterior motive to overthrow a given regime, nor does it side with one faction against the other. Since assuming power in 2014, President Abdel al-Sisi has regularly visited African countries. The important role that Egypt plays in support of the African countries is now more pronounced than ever. Egypt will host the UN Climate Change Conference, COP27, in the Red Sea resort city of Sharm el-Sheikh, and will catch the opportunity to present African crucial issues, problems, and aspirations during this important encounter, which will gather representatives from all over the world. Egypt is also keen to establish a risk insurance fund to encourage Egyptian entrepreneurs to invest in other African countries. This, in addition to a guarantee fund dedicated to investing in infrastructure, information technology, and high-end digitization of African economies.
فيها 100 مليون، مصر كمان مساحتها 1,000,000 كيلومتر مربع. بس في حجم ضخم جدا من الأراضي احنا مش عايشين عليه. ما خدناش بالنا على مدى 60-70 سنة فاتوا إن الكلام ده هيبقى ليه تأثير كبير جدا وخطير على حياتنا ومستقبلنا. لكن احنا مش سايبين لا القاهرة ولا اسكندرية ولا بورسعيد ولا المحافظات، بنتحرك في كل القديم والجديد مع بعض عشان يليق بينا ويليق بالمصريين يعني. الموضوع مش مباني بس، لا ده تطور كبير قوي احنا بنعمله. فأرجو ان احنا نستعد مفكرين مثقفين فنانين. هذا الحدث الكبير ميلاد دولة جديدة بافتتاح العاصمة الجديدة. ميلاد دولة جديدة. إعلان جمهورية تانية.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and we're joined tonight here in the studio by Dr. Mohamed Haleem, the political analyst. Dr. Haleem, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Sir, now, since 2014, Egypt has reiterated its position towards the African continent, the African states. The president made it very clear that Egypt will follow a certain path and a certain strategy to strengthen its relations with its African neighbors. And there have been a lot of activities, projects, initiatives, agreements, visits between Egypt and the whole of the African continent. Now, before we start delving into the details of it, how would you rate the distance we've come so far since 2014 and obviously chairing the African Union in 2019, like up until now, 2022, how much has been done in strengthening the Egyptian-African relations?
Before we begin with, let me represent my deepest condolences actually and feelings of sadness for the departure of the bereaved and the dear ones actually, the sudden departure actually of the 41 Christian soul actually in the church of Abu Safin in Baba al-Giza, and all the best wishes actually for a very speedy recovery for those who had been badly injured actually. The scene that seems to be quite devastating, the whole, I wouldn't say the Christian world, but the whole world at large actually. But what seems to be quite interesting is the sort of solidarity and the sense of, salvation among all those people actually would, sacrifice their own lives for the sake of the others, actually saving them at moments of distress and moments of, calamities, I would say.
Yes. Deepest condolences.
Again, to shed a little light actually on the presidential visits and the agreements and the sort of the partnerships actually that had been dealt with, that had been done during the course of the period of the past 8 years actually. You can really say that what characterizes the presidential tenure actually of His Own Excellency Mr. Abdel is the sort of the, I wouldn't say the sudden return to the heart of Africa, but the gradual, the very decent and the very diplomatic as much as the strategic return again to the heart of Africa, actually in much the same way that the African countries came to be regarded as very much looking in Egypt, the example to be followed, very much exemplary, interfering every now and again to try to solve the problematic situations and the tussles, the struggles, and to the extent of, freeing some countries actually from colonial outlooks and from the impediments of terrorism and the sense of extremism actually. This is to outward seeming actually the sort of the the survey of the previous 8 years seems to be very much successful, very much inaugurative, and opening the road for more peaceful talks and solving a large number of problems and impediments, not only on local level, but actually on an international arena in the meantime.
Well, you've mentioned a lot of the presidential visits, and now Egypt obviously chaired the African Union for a year in 2019, and during that chairmanship, an African free trade agreement has been initiated, really to encourage the sort of economic trade and cooperation between all African states, including Egypt, of course. Now, how much do you feel such an agreement is important, especially at such an integral time and a critical time that the whole world is going through right now, with crises, energy crises, food and wheat crises? How much important could this agreement prove nowadays?
What seems to be very much drastic and very much sad is the the sort of the alienation and extreme sense of isolation of Egypt from the continent of Africa for quite a long period of time, since the false attempt actually of the previous president assassination, false assassination at Addis Ababa. All the consulatic ties did come to a halt, very much stopped for quite a long period of time, without the least hope for return. Had it not been for the interference and the return again, the diplomatic and the peaceful one on the part of His Excellency Mr. Abdel Sisi, actually that seems to be quite amazing for almost all the world, even the Western countries that are very much praising the diplomatic and the admirable rightness and the very much successful attempts and dealing with a large number of impediments and critical issues, as much as returning again to the heart of Africa is one of the master strokes of His Own Excellency, actually, particularly at these particular situations. I mean, for example, Somalia is one of those very much important and interesting countries that we stopped our own diplomatic and consulatic ties with it, actually, for quite a long period of time. Only, a week ago, his advent, that is the Somalian president, Mr. Hassan al-Sheikh Mahmoud, actually, and the peaceful agreement and reception, actually, here at Al-Ittihadiyya, was very much striking a very good example of returning to the heart of Africa with great deal of success, the sort of the alienation that would extend for quite a long period of time during the period of the last president, that was called Mohamed Abdel, who was very much biased and lenient towards Turkey, towards Tehran, towards Qatar, towards the Muslim Brotherhood, actually. We've had a very, bad time during that era, but with his own advent and with sending, Dr. Mustafa Madbouli on on a high-profile delegation, actually, to receive him and to, to attend the inauguration presidential party at Somalia, was very much welcomed to a greater extent on his own part, on the part of Mr. President Hassan al-Sheikh Ali. To the extent that when he decided, actually, to start his own first European as much as external tour, I would say, he would opt for Egypt to be his own first station, actually, where he was widely welcomed, actually, at the Ittihadiyya Palace. The visit as it stands is very much important, particularly that it comes after, as I've just said, at the end of a very long period of incubation stage, of a stage of alienation and dereliction, actually, and the diplomatic ties. And again, you can really feel that it acquires a pride of place among all the other visits. And so far as, we have discussed a large number of mutual subjects of mutual interest, of mutual concern, I would say, such as the illegal immigration, actually. That was an absolute sense of headache for a large number of European countries for quite a long period of time. A sort of an action that devastated almost all their own interests in leading a peaceful life, and that came to be stopped by the intervention on the part of the Egyptian presidency, actually, that did stop almost all these illegal immigrants, as much as, putting an end for terrorist actions and actions of terrorism, actually. Because, I mean, you know, for also a long period of time, Somalia was passing through, you know, I mean, some threatening voices and attacks on the part of some parties, such as the movement of Yes, actually, that is very much belonging to Al-Qaeda. And in this respect, it would benefit to a greater extent from the Egyptian experience of putting an end for terrorism, as much as the organized crimes transcending the border lines. All these things of mutual concern and of mutual identification with each other would give us a clear testimony to the fact that Egypt is returning very much gradually and to a greater extent successfully to the heart of Africa, particularly at moments of crises. I mean, the international crisis and the wheat crisis and the food, you know, I mean, problematic situation of the lack of the shortage of food and wheat, actually, not only in Egypt, but actually in almost in the whole world, including the European world as well, that would come at the end or during the course of the onslaughts on the part of Russia on Ukraine, that would leave its devastating impact on almost all the whole world. And in the meantime, after a long period of incubation, that is the period of the COVID-19 epidemic, almost, you know, a certain individual case in which the whole world actually would seem to be quite passing through, I mean, shortages, crises and impediments actually that would, to a greater extent, stop and, you know, I mean, undermine all prospects of progress and life as well.
Yes. Well, Dr. Haleem, you've mentioned the sort of assistance that Egypt has been passing to a lot of African states who are going through their own economic crises, political turbulences, political divisions as well. And it's a very changing dynamic within each and every African state. And Egypt has made it clear, providing all the assistance, be it political, security, even medical during the COVID-19. Do you feel that all the African states are receiving this sort of assistance and helping hand and the big brother sort of personality and character that Egypt is playing within the African continent the same way? Or do you feel that these crises are still creating a little bit of challenges and obstacles?
To a greater extent, we did manage to put an end for a large number of turbulences and obstacles and a large number of impediments, actually, concerning our own diplomatic relations with these countries. We have succeeded to a greater extent of sending medical instruments, of signing very much successful strategic joint defense actions, actually, between Egypt on the one hand and Djibouti, for example, as a sort of a very important country within the whole African, you know, level, or the whole African countries, with its own strategic importance and geopolitical interest, actually, with its own, you know, I mean, sense of interesting details that would give us a great deal of benefit, actually, when we exchange, for example, merchandise items. We enhance the free zone era and area, and in the meantime helping them in their own problematic issues. But in the meantime, perhaps the most strategic and important trap of the presidential tour on the part of His Excellency Mr. Fattah Sisi is his own advent to Djibouti at one time when it was seemed to be quite impossible, actually, for an Egyptian president actually to achieve that great deal of success and to reach to Djibouti with its own strategic importance on the point of view of the borderlines. The fact that from the east it would face the Red Sea as much as the Bay of Aden or Aden Bay, and from the west it would overlook the Ethiopian borderlines, which is very much important to our own strategic plans. And putting an end for all our own troubles on a peaceful means with Addis Ababa, actually, the sort of the thing that was initiated at one time and was demolished, I would say. All the prospects that had been ruined on the part of Abiy Ahmed when he would transcend and would violate and infringe upon the international law by not abiding by the laws of the principles that was to be signed in 2015. And in the meantime, by the besieging sort of danger, by the sort of the indifference on his own part, actually, to abide by the regulations and regularities and the decisions of the international law. I mean, the visit of His Own Excellency Mr. Abdel to Djibouti at one time, I mean, transcending all these tribulations and all these problematic situations. And in the meantime, you know, I mean, communicating with the Djibouti soldiers in very much successful maneuvers and providing them with very much interesting details of ammunitions, of weaponries, that would help them actually to a greater extent to try to stabilize their own situation within the African territory. And in the meantime, its own importance would arise from the fact that there are about 6 foreign bases actually in Djibouti, American, Italian, French, and American. All these bases would seem to be at one time very much threatening the sense of stability, and in the meantime would act as an embedding fact within the problematic situation of the Renaissance Dam. That's why his own advent in there at that very much critical time and that particular situation would in somehow or another help inaugurate very much peaceful talks that would end in solving the issue that seems to be quite very much nightmarish and very much, you know, I mean, problematic for almost all the parties.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Egypt is leading the way for the African continent, not just in terms of security, medical assistance and political stability as well, but also in on the path to development and sustainable development. Let's check out this report and we'll be right back.
The world marked the annual Africa Day on the 25th of May to commemorate the founding of the Organization of African Unity, or the OAU, in 1963 in Ethiopia's capital Addis Ababa by 32 African countries. The organization then evolved into the present-day 55-member state African Union, AU. This year, the Africa Day's theme centered around the importance of addressing malnutrition and food insecurity. Egypt has pledged to continue cooperation with African people to achieve these issues and resolve decades-long disputes. Celebrations came amid amplified challenges facing the continent due to the global crisis, including the coronavirus, climate change, as well as most recently the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which has affected global food supplies. Egypt has repeatedly affirmed keenness to enhance cooperation with African countries to consolidate security and stability on the continent, combat terrorism, and develop energy transition. President Abdel al-Sisi has vowed to continue working along with African brothers to achieve sustainable development and enhance joint efforts to resolve issues and disputes that the continent has suffered from for decades that have prevented dreams of the continent's sons from coming true. President al-Sisi called on enhancing unity and joint cooperation amongst African states, in addition to taking firm steps towards creating a stable continent that guarantees a decent life for its people and institutes a culture of civilization and tolerance. Last January, President al-Sisi called to formulate a clear African strategy to eliminate terrorism and dry up its sources of financing. He highlighted Egypt's endeavor to provide assistance to African nations by intensifying training courses, combating terrorism, and participating in UN peacekeeping missions. President al-Sisi also affirmed Egypt's readiness to provide more support at a bilateral level or through AU mechanisms. Egypt hosted the 17th conference of the Committee of Intelligence and Security Service of Africa, during which it affirmed the need to continue exerting efforts to preserve the security of the African continent and achieve aspirations of its peoples. Egypt continues its contribution to achieve security and coordination to help overcome security risks, plus fighting extremist ideologies. Egypt stressed the necessity to follow up and monitor on the rest of the security challenges, including illegal immigration, unemployment, cybersecurity, and organized crime. The state has worked on enhancing cooperation among countries of the continent to achieve peace and face challenges. It managed to reinforce the state of security in the continent through the principle of African solutions to African problems.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Abdel Haleem. Now, sir, Egypt is on its path to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. Every day we keep hearing about new projects, new initiatives, a transformation in the economic direction of the country. And the whole of the African continent has its own goal to reach sustainable development by 2063. Now, Egypt has been lending many helping hands to African states, building dams in Tanzania, offering the offices and the committees responsible for the Decent Life Initiative to go and help with their own know-how and expertise in African countries. How far do you think the rest of the African continent are in really reaching the sustainable development for 2063? Are they working as fast as Egypt is?
Yes, I mean, we are aiming since quite a long time of achieving the sustainable development. I mean, from medical point of view, cultural outlook, as much as in the meantime in strengthening our own armies, as much as fortifying the armies of all these countries, actually, just by way of, you know, I mean, helping them actually to act in a maneuvering way that would, in somehow or another, defend their own border lines and their own territories, actually. For example, I mean, Egypt was helping Sudan for quite a long period of time, since the overthrow of late Omar al-Bashir, who was very much, I mean, lenient towards the Muslim Brotherhood. I mean, there was a little conspiracy, actually, in Sudan, initiated by some officers and some soldiers, actually, that are very much loyal to the late Omar al-Bashir. Here, Egypt would find it quite a threatening detail, actually, and very much prerequisite to try to interfere just by way of putting an end for that sort of conspiracy. And in the meantime, helping the Transitional Supreme Council in there to try to erect a sense of very much successful elections, defending their own democratic opinions and their own freedom of expression, selecting what sort of president that they would seem to be quite able to select in the near future. And in the meantime, try to very much minimizing the sort of, you know, I mean, the sanctions that had been posed and imposed on Sudan to a greater extent, helping them in the meantime of putting an end for illegal immigrations from there by fortifying the border lines between Egypt on the one hand and Sudan on the other, to the extent that we have had very much successful maneuvers in there, and the Egyptian armed forces actually did parade very interesting details of maneuvering and of training all those Sudanese soldiers and Sudanese army, actually, of trying to defend itself, particularly, I mean, against the threats of the Ethiopian country, when there was a sort of a tussling point of, you know, of the borderlines between Djibouti, between Ethiopia on the one hand and Shankul Valley, the sort of the valley in which the Renaissance Dam was to be erected.
Yes.
That was very much problematic, a sort of devastating attack on the part of, you know, I mean, the Ethiopian troops that would, I mean, strike a very good example of how they would have to be quite facing the reality as it actually is when it comes to truce. Again, we, in somehow or another, helped them to a greater extent of trying to reach to a peaceful solutions of putting an end for Darfur agreement, actually, the sort of an agreement that would end actually of a ceasefire and silencing guns, and to reach to a peaceful road towards the selection of the presidential reign as much as the parliamentary elections, actually.
Sir, one final question, because we're running out of time, but Egypt, with its main leading role within the African continent, now Egypt is acting as a bridge between the African states and the other Arab countries, be it in North Africa or in the Gulf, and as well within the international community. And we are approaching COP27 in a little bit less than 3 months. Now, how can Egypt, as a bridge between all these different states play a major role to guarantee that the African states get their fair share of help and support from the developed countries, from other Arab countries, in terms of helping them combat climate change?
As a matter of fact, Egypt has had a very leading role at this particular respect. I mean, that was to be well prepared by Egyptian attendants, actually, of the Agreement of Paris. That was about 5 years ago, as much as the COP26 that was at Glasgow, about the climate change and how the devastating aspects of the nuclear wars and atomic bombs and the exchange of the nuclear emissions and the exchange of the ozone layer that is to be expanded every now and again. All these aspects and problematic issues came to be discussed during all these summits by His Own Excellency's attendance and insistence of defending the rights of the Africans, of representing how that they are to be not to be blamed in any respect by, you know, I mean, the sort of the demolition and devastating details on the part of the industrialization, the sort of the industrial revolution that extended from perhaps the 19th century until today by almost and mainly by Western countries. And that's all these African innocent, let me say, so to speak, countries would have to be quite, you know, I mean, paid for the sense of the demolition, that they would have to be provided with ways and means and tools through the aid of which they can really defend themselves first against the external threats on the part of these Western countries, then internally on the part of the maximization of the heat emissions and the climate change, the sort of the thing that will integrate and will end up in our own very much successful selection of attending, of presiding over the COP27 actually, Sheikh next November actually.
Yes.
The sort of the selection of Egypt actually nominates and underlines the symbolic association of the Egyptian presidency actually of almost international subjects to be discussed on a social arena, on an international arena that would end up actually in our own defendants actually of the European countries and speaking in lieu of them on the part of the presidential authority.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Dr. Abdel Haleem has mentioned, hopefully Egypt will take this leading role that it has been playing for many years now within the African continent to be a successful ambassador for the rest of the African states in the next COP27 summit in November. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Mohamed Abdel Haleem, the political analyst. Dr. Abdel Haleem, always a pleasure having you with us on the show.
My pleasure, sir.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Nile International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.